Welcome to Relax, the new version of Laxin and Loungin'. If you have heard us before, we had Dylan Axman and Zach Ossie on our staff as speakers, but as they have graduated, we now have new guests, Grant Klein and Charlie Crumpler, who are also captains on the Middle Creek lacrosse team.
I would like to thank our sponsors for today's video, Fliff Casino. Fliff Casino is a social casino where you can get free cash every day and play slots or table games and make money. Thank you, Fliff Social Casino, for sponsoring this video.
The new lacrosse year is upon us, with Week 0 and Week 1 just finishing up, and Week 2 among us. Heading into Week 2, most teams have already began to play their first bit of games. We've got a solid top 5.
For the upcoming weeks, our watch list are going to be the top 5 rated teams, with number 1, Notre Dame, number 2, Syracuse, number 3, Cornell, number 4, Johns Hopkins, and number 5, Princeton. Notre Dame's bringing back senior Chris Kavanaugh, who is a Tewaaraton watch list player, and the 5th-year Jake Taylor. They're also losing Chris Kavanaugh's brother, Pat Kavanaugh, and star goalie Liam Entenmann.
Yeah, and you also got, Jordan Fajon now, especially coming off of a rough national championship loss. Coach wants to keep him fresh, though, against Cleveland State, so he won't be playing. And then they'll also be playing Marquette and most likely Georgetown.
Yeah, but they do have new star freshman Brady Picorni, who had 12 goals in his scrimmage.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to see Chris Kavanaugh really step into that senior leadership position that his brother had last year. He had 4 goals and 5 assists in a scrimmage against Harvard.
Yeah, and it was good to see Jake Taylor with 7 goals scoring, even though they lost their top assister, Pat Kavanaugh's last year. Jake Taylor also coming off of a 41-goal season in 2024.
I'm just interested to see how they're going to play back home at South Bend in front of fans against Marquette in their next game.
Yeah, well, then they have Georgetown in a little rematch in which Georgetown was actually their only loss last year during the regular season. And
that's away, too. That's going to be a tough game.
I know, in D.C. So in the playoffs, though, last year, they beat Georgetown as a little rematch. So now Georgetown might be looking out.
It's going to be a little juicy revenge.
But then we have the Syracuse Orange men's lacrosse team, ranked number 2, just behind Notre Dame. Behind goal scorers like Owen Hiltz and Joey Spallina, along with midfielders Luke Roa and Michael Leo. They faced Jacksonville, Towson, and Vermont in their first 3 games, in which Joey Spallina was able to notch 5 goals and 5 assists against Vermont, along with 5 points and 6 points versus Jacksonville and Towson.
Yeah, and Luke Rose scored a hat trick in all the first 3 games, so he should be a threat against Maryland. And they got a very talented Canadian lefty attackman in Owen Hiltz, who scored 4 goals.
Yeah, and they also have, the lefty midfielder Michael Leo from Long Island. He went to St. Anthony's, and he's done a really good job producing out of the midfield along with Luke Roa. So now they're looking to continue to receive great production out of them, and it's a lot better than last year, where last year the midfield was a little bit absent, so it kind of left the defense hanging, and it also left the attacks to have to do all the work on offense. I think that Maryland and the Syracuse matchup is going to be a really good one, as they're both, top teams. But another team in Maryland that's really good this year seems to be Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, after a couple down seasons, they're back at the helm of college lacrosse, and they're looking dangerous this year.
And Hopkins opens with Denver, as always. They opened last year with Denver, in which that was one of the best games of all season last year. But this year they opened with Denver and came out and won 13-10 as, star attackman Russell Melendez scored 4 goals and 2 assists.
And they followed up that big win against Denver with a close win against Towson, crosstown rival 11-10.
Yeah, and Hunter Chavette, the sophomore lefty, the sniper, had 4-1 against them, and I'm pretty sure every single one of his goals were from the same spot and the same way of shooting, low to high.
He was getting chirped a bunch too.
Yeah,
how them calves?
Yeah, they kept asking
it.
Yeah, they were saying he was skinny and small, and he put 4 goals in and ended up winning for his team.
Turned around, gave him a little shh. He said, "Shh, baby girl."
Following up that win with a win against Georgetown too, they performed really well and was able to sneak in a win 11-6 against Georgetown, who's really, a top 20 team, very solid, has great players on offense and defense all over the field, has All-Americans, and they still were able to win. They also beat Loyola Maryland by 1-9-8. Russell Melendez hit the game winner in overtime, really solidifying his name as kind of Mr. Clutch, including Matt Collison, who also is known as Mr. Clutch because he always comes in the big-time moments. But we'll see how they do against a team like North Carolina, who is kind of making their way towards the top 10 after having a couple down years, but are looking hot, really hot this year.
Yeah, but after Hopkins, UNC actually plays Princeton, who's number 4 in the country right now. Yeah, and they narrowly beat Penn State in overtime thanks to Coulter McAsee, their leading scorer at the time.
Yeah, and they've only played one game, so can't really see how good they are they are right now. But obviously, they are looking to be one of the best teams in the country, as they are ranked in the top 5. But they also have a hard matchup against Maryland this coming weekend, and we'll see what they can do. And that's the game before UNC, so we'll see what they can do. We'll see if sophomores Nate Kabiri and Colin Burns can step up and how they're going to play this year, and see what's going to happen.
Another sophomore that can produce well is Cornell's attackman, Ryan Goldstein. He finished last season with 36 points, and he rounded out one of the best attack lines in the country.
Yeah, that attack line is consisting of Michael Long and C.J. Kirst. C.J. Kirst is a Tewaaraton finalist, and he really looks like he could be the best player in the country, especially when in his first game he scores like 5 goals. And Michael Long,
so alpha.
Yeah, and Michael Long has one of his best friends they've been playing since high school. He came back for his 5th year, and he was the second leading scorer for the team and was probably one of the better attackmen last year. And this year he looks like he's even better. So we'll see what happens with that. And against Denver, C.J. Kirst went 6 of 6 shooting, so he had 6 goals on 6 shots, perfect. And then he also tagged along 2 assists to lead his team in a win over Denver, where it wasn't even close, really. I think it was 15-5. So Denver, who started in the top 10 this year after making a Final Four run last year, is now fallen out of the top 10, probably out of the top 15 leading into next week, and they're just continuing to go down the polls. And teams like UNC are starting to jump up into the top 10. Maryland's at 6, along with Virginia, who has kind of fallen. They were originally at 7, but now they're falling out of the top 10. They're around 14, 15. They're probably going to be around there this year as well, or this week as well. Duke has moved up to 7. They're at that 7 mark. Yale has moved back a little bit just because Army's goalie is playing really well. He's saving like 76% of his shots, I believe. And
something like that. It's
yeah,
absurd.
It's absurd. It's unnatural, really. And
I think it's 'cause
but yeah. Army's been playing really well. They've gotten back into the top 10. They started off as number 1 last year at the beginning of the year, but they've started to fall a little bit. It looks like we got, Penn. It hasn't really played that much, played a few games, 1 or 2. They're moving up as they've been winning by a lot. They've been blowing teams out, really. Penn State lost to Princeton, moved back a little bit. They're out of the top 10 just by a few spots. Denver continues to, move back as they've always, they've always been good, but they're starting to lose a little bit of games, but they'll probably kick it around and turn around this season, like later in the season.
And, Harvard's got a big matchup coming up against Syracuse, trying to prove themselves and that, they're still a top Ivy League threat.
Yeah, and Towson, Georgetown, they're falling back a little bit just because they've lost a few games. And, Towson doesn't really look like the team that they were towards the end of last year, where they made the tournament. They stuck it close with Syracuse, where this year against Syracuse they kind of got blown out a little bit as their schedule is becoming a little bit tougher towards the end of the towards the middle of the year, and towards the end of the year their schedule that will then go a little bit easier, just in the fact that their conference play really isn't as tough as the teams that they're playing right now. And in the middle of the year, they're not going to be playing the number 2 and number 3 and number 6 ranked team in the countries. So they'll look to win out in their conference, hopefully make the NCAA tournament, and by that time they'll be ready to go against some of these top teams.
And, Delaware beat a strong team in Utah, knocking them out and then moving up to the top 20. And then Michigan lost a close one to UNC, but they're really looking to bounce back as they got Duke this week.
Yeah, they still sit in the top 20. They're ranked at 19. It's not, they're not falling too far off, but they definitely need to start winning some games if they want to stay in that top 20. And right behind them at 20, very close behind them actually, is Providence, who upset, Bryant, because Bryant was about to crack into the top 20, but they're starting to move up in the ranks in Providence. And attackman Ryan Bell for Providence, first game he had 8 assists, which is 0 goals, but 8 assists, which is kind of ridiculous. He's kind of one of the top attackmen in the country, even though he's at a smaller school. He's helping Providence move up in the ranks, and compared to last year, it's kind of crazy that Providence could be this high.
And Colgate's looking to crack into the top 20. They just beat Harvard, Villanova,
and I believe
who's the
Albany.
third?
I believe Albany.
Albany.
But Albany and Villanova were right outside of the top 20 at the time. They were about to, get into the top 20. And Harvard, obviously, they're sitting in the top 20, and they're looking to move up in the ranks.
The only thing that's really keeping Colgate out of the top 20 is that they've lost to Penn State and Virginia, who are other top 20 teams.
Yeah, but, if they can continue to prove themselves, win a couple more big games, I think that they're going to go into the top 20, continue to rise. And if they win their conference, I think, maybe they'll be able to get into the tournament. They're in a very tough conference because I believe they're in the Patriot League with Army, Navy, who are both top teams in the country. Navy's just outside of the top 20. Army's, entering into the top 10 really right now. And Boston is very good this year. They look pretty good. They're, I believe, 3-1. They're moving up a little bit, kind of similar to Navy, where they're closer into the top 20. So the Patriot League looks very competitive this year. I definitely think that each team could, win a few, lose a few. They could all make the tournament, but because of how many slots there are and how many teams there are, it's going to be a little tough. Maybe only 2 of them, when really 4 of them should have made the tournament, will make it, but we'll see. And, that's all we've got for the Relaxin podcast. So thank you for listening today, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. So thank you, and tune in next week.